Welcome to this webinar of the Jerusalem Press Club, which is part of a series we are running towards the upcoming presidential elections in the US. I'm privileged to host today Ambassador Danny Ayalon, who served as Israel's ambassador to Washington between 2002 and 2006, later became Deputy Foreign Minister. Ambassador Ayalon, thanks for joining us today. First of all, would you dare assessing or guessing who will win on November 3rd?
Uri, first of all, thank you for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be with you always, and it's great to see you again. Not a chance. There's no telling whatsoever. I would say that in normal times, it seems like it's a no-brainer that Biden is the winner. But given all the upheavals and surprises in the polls, both here in the United States, I wouldn't dare guessing at this point. But ask me after the 3rd of November. And there is another option that people are fearful of, Uri, and that is there will not be a decisive result at November 4th, and maybe they'll have to wait weeks or even months, and maybe even take it to the Supreme Court to decide, like 2000 between Al Gore and George Bush. So everything is open.
Right. How would you characterize the US-Israel relations during the Trump term? Was he really the greatest friend of Israel, as he's sometimes described, or was it more rhetoric than substance?
Well, first of all, rhetoric is also important, and I'll tell you why. Rhetoric is important because this is a signal to friends and foes alike, whether Israel is fair game or not. First of all, to the region here, but also to other countries in the international arena. And most, if there is a daylight, during the President Obama, he talked about a daylight between Israel and the United States as an instrument to further peace in the Middle East. But that wasn't the case, because if the United States doesn't have Israel's back in international fora, like in the Security Council or others, then the Europeans and others have the signal to keep pressing on Israel almost in a brutal way. So the rhetoric of Trump, I think, put the pressure on Israel from others, Europeans and others aside. BDS also is on its way down in the United States because of some legislations also of different states in the United States, as well as in the federal level. And I think the rhetorics also brought about what we have been witnessing just yesterday in the last few weeks, having the Sunni Arab countries, the moderate Sunni Arab countries, coming now to the surface with Israel. The relations with them started way before Trump, but it was all under the radar. Now they're not afraid to come out. So you cannot dismiss, I would say, and I know Trump is very, very controversial everywhere in the world, but when it comes to Israel, there are some things that he did that I think helped the strategic situation in the area and for Israel in particular.
Whatever happened to the Trump deal of the century? It seems like it faded away, no?
Yes, Uri, and I think it was dead on arrival. Of course, it was from the Palestinians' point of view. Of course, it was very one-sided. But again, the Palestinians, much as I feel for them as a people, I think they cannot forgive their leadership. The Palestinian leadership has always been intransigent, was never really forthcoming. I think Abu Mazen made a mistake, and I was talking to some of them, Palestinians. Even if they do not trust Trump, at least come to the table and negotiate, not with us, with the Americans. See if you can show what are your concerns, And instead, they just were berating it. They called the Trump names, they called his ambassadors here names, instead of really trying to look at it and maybe better it from their own perspective. So I don't think there was any chance for this plan to move ahead. But Trump is Trump, he didn't give up. And then he took what I say like his plan B or fallback. And the fallback was bringing the Arab countries for peace with Israel as a means for his own legacy, but also for changing the situation and maybe putting the pressure on the Palestinians from the outside.
So the conventional wisdom was always that once the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is resolved, the rest of the Arab countries won't have problem in reconciling with Israel. So the Abraham Accords seem to have changed the rules. What is your take on this?
Absolutely. I think it's a paradigm shift, because for the first time, we see a president, and maybe it takes a, let's say, I'm trying to be, maybe it takes a very unusual president and person to to turn things around. Because, we saw, and Uri, you have followed it certainly for the last 25 or more years since Oslo and before. We have been successive presidents, Republicans and Democrats alike, who tried the same thing or more of the same for the last 25 years, only to hit a brick wall. Comes Trump and he says, no, we do not take this convention that first you have to do peace between Israel and the United States, and then normalize relations with the Arab countries. Let's do the other way around. What we say, instead of going from inside out, you go from the outside in. And I must say, many were skeptical, but so far he has succeeded.
Speaking about it, a few weeks ago, we hosted here Saeb Erekat, a leading Palestinian negotiator and politician, who was very vocal in his opposition to what he labeled as another show of betrayal of the Palestinians by fellow Arabs. Now he's in a critical condition at Abbas Hospital in Jerusalem due to COVID-19, and we wish him full recovery. Do you know him? Did you ever encounter him?
Yes, I know him very well. First of all, we were born in the same year. And secondly, we had a lot of FaceTime together, starting with the Y. If you recall, Uri, the Y conference with Ehud Barak and Arafat and Clinton. I'm sorry, not Ehud Barak, with Bibi at the Y Plantation. And also then at the Sharm el-Sheikh conference with Ehud Barak and Clinton, and Mubarak, and Erekat. And then I saw him many times. He's a very smart guy. He's, I'd say, very sophisticated person, very smart, very intelligent. But I think he was very, very rigid when it came to, let's say, the negotiations and taking any kind of concessions on their side. He was very rigid. Even the issue of a Jewish state, which I think is something which is normal, doesn't take away anything from the Palestinians. He was so dead against recognizing Israel as a Jewish state. I mean, I was stunned when he, came with a barrage of of curses when it came to that.
So anyway, we wish him a full recovery.
Absolutely.
It seems that Prime Minister Netanyahu, surely with the help of the current Israeli ambassador in Washington, Ron Dermer, put all the eggs in the basket of Donald Trump. What happens if Joe Biden is elected? How will it affect the US-Israel relation?
Well, I would say from the bigger picture, it shouldn't, because Israel-US relations are so important for so many reasons. For Israel, for sure, but also for the United States, that the relations will continue, I would say, regardless of who occupies the White House. Of course, the tone may be different, the nuances may be different, personal relations may be different, but I would advise, Bibi Netanyahu and his people, not to wait until the 3rd of November, but already reach out to the Biden campaign. It's only normal to do. You know, when I was in Washington, 2004, there were elections between John Kerry and Bush. And of course, I went to meet John Kerry and arranged a phone call between him and Arik Sharon, who was the prime minister. It's only normal. I don't know if this was the case this time, but if it wasn't, it was a mistake. And I think there will be a lot of backpedaling to do. If Biden is elected, both Netanyahu and his people will have to, I would say, try and dialogue immediately and try to build confidence and be very transparent and talk about things. This would be imperative.
One of the main goals of Netanyahu was to scuttle the Iran deal brokered by President Obama. And once Trump was elected, Netanyahu has actually achieved that goal. However, in doing so, he alienated many Democrats, especially with the unprecedented appearance in the Congress defying President Obama's policy. If Biden, again, is elected, do you think he and the Democrats will hold a grudge towards Netanyahu?
Biden not. See, Uri, I know Biden very well because during my time in Washington, you know, he was a very senior member of the Foreign Relations Committee of the Senate. So we have met so many times, and you know, he always boasted, he still does, that he is the only senator alive then and certainly now that had met every Israeli prime minister since Golda Meir until now. You know, he was elected first to the Senate in 1972. So he met everyone since Golda Meir until now. He's a good friend. If you look at his record of votes in the Senate, but also of statesmen, he's a true friend. Having said that, I think today the Democratic Party may not be the same as it was even 12 years ago. So he has, and already we know, he has an opposition in his own party. We know that the Democratic Party basically is looking for a direction, and there is an underground struggle between, I would say, the mainstream. Biden is one of them, Schumer is another one, of course, the Clintons, and what they're called the progressives, you know, the Bernie Sanders, Miss Presley, and ACC, and Rashida Tlaib, and Ilhan Omar. So there's going to be a struggle. But I think Biden personally would not have a grudge. Maybe a little bit, you know, but he will go over it. I think also depends on the people he will elect. One of them, which I know very well, is Tony Blinken. Tony Blinken is a great friend of Israel. He's a Jewish guy from New York. He was also a deputy secretary of state, also was deputy advisor of national security under Obama and Biden. So if he is, you know, and he may be one of the candidates to become either Secretary of State under Biden or National Security Advisor. If he is there, Tony Blinken, I think that will be very easy for Israel. But there are others who may have grudge. You know, we have Susan Rice, which also may be slated for becoming the next Secretary of State. We have Dennis McDonough, we have Ben Rhodes and others. So with them, it will be much, much more difficult. So Israel will have to do a lot of backpedaling and do a lot of explanation. But at the end of the day, it could also be an opportunity.
If Biden is elected and he returns to the Iran deal, if you were in government today, how would you advise the Prime Minister to act upon it?
Fly immediately to Washington, to the White House. Even before that, even before the inauguration, you know, in the time of the of the turnover, I would try to speak with the people and go with them, not against them. I think the opportunity is, And as we know, the American, let's say, decision-making process, it's a very well thought out. So it's not the day one that Biden occupies the White House that they will return and resume the deal with Iran. They'll have to look at it fresh. Things have changed in the last, let's say, 4 years since they were in government. And, as you know, when it comes to international relations, when there are no sentiments, when they come to the Iranians now, they say, okay, we are coming back, but there may be some strings attached. And here, I think this is where an Israeli-American dialogue would be very important. Again, not in a confrontational way, but just going together and looking for the common grounds. For instance, maybe we can include in the deal now, changing it a little bit to include banning of testing of ballistic missiles by Iran, or stop supporting terror, or maybe enhance a little bit the verification process and make it a little tougher. So these things that we should discuss with them, and certainly not go against the United States, and hopefully come to some kind of an understanding that everybody will be happy to live with.
One side effect of Netanyahu taking on Obama and then partnering so closely with Trump is that support of Israel has become somewhat a partisan issue. Are you concerned about the possible erosion in the support of Israel in general in the American public if Biden is elected, and in particular in the American Jewish community, where according to recent AJC poll, 3 out of every 4 people vote for a Democratic candidate?
Well, Uri, I'm very much concerned. The bipartisan support was always kind of the holy grail of the relations. And this was very, very important for us, never to get between the two parties, never to get into this political line of fire. This has not been the case, unfortunately. And I think the two sides of the oceans are to be blamed. It's not just old Bibi. As I mentioned, it started with Obama. This is where I can see the difference happening. But it's us, that it is incumbent upon us. Israel is the one that has to reach out, and to reach out to Democrats in a way that has not been done, unfortunately, in the last 4 years.
What about the settlements? If Trump himself dumped the annexation issue in return for the Abraham Accords, surely a Democratic administration under Biden would make it even more difficult to impose Israeli sovereignty in Judea and Samaria.
I have no doubt. Absolutely. Absolutely. Their entire approach to the Palestinian issue is different. And the question is, it's basically an intellectual question, is, given the changes that Trump caused, with these Arab countries, it will be interesting to see if Biden will continue this line, or he will go back to the old line, of Obama and Clinton and Bush and everybody of saying, no, we have to go back and solve the Palestinian. But now, we already will have relations with the Emirates, with Bahrain, probably other countries will join. It will be interesting to see whether he will continue the line of, or the policy of Trump, and maybe leverage this relations normalization that we have with the Arab countries to put the pressure now on the Palestinians. So, I'm sure it will be nuanced. So it's not that the Palestinians will get a carte blanche like at some points they had with John Kerry when he was the Secretary of State under Obama. But there's no doubt that the sentiments to the Palestinians would be much warmer by a Biden administration. Of course, I'm sure that they will welcome, and I think Biden already made a statement about welcoming the peace between Israel and the Gulf countries. So this will not change. The question is whether they will be let's say, diplomatically adept to use it to move forward the Palestinian-Israeli issue.
Talking back again about the Arab countries, which are now joining the process. You think there's more in store in Trump's sleeve? You know, maybe the big prize, Saudi Arabia, will come. And do you think Biden can offer something Trump didn't do, or maybe he will stop this kind of trend?
Well, I think more coming. I think they're talking about Sudan, and Sudan has something to gain because Trump is promising them to take them off the terror list if they would come to make peace with Israel. Maybe they will seize the opportunity to do it when Trump is still in office. I don't know. When Biden is there, I think he will continue this trend, and especially with the Saudis. The Saudis will probably come last, but you know, things can come gradually, but not during King Salman. You know, King Salman is, you know, from the old school. He's a conservative, but his son, you know, Ben Salman, MBS. If he becomes the king, I think chances are to have an open relationship. And I think also Ben Salman, MBS, has a personal interest here because after his involvement with the murder of Khashoggi, the Saudi journalist in Turkey, you know, he has been ostracized. He has not been welcomed in Western capitals. So, you know, if making peace with Israel will help him personally, then I think we may have a chance.
So it takes all kind of ways and means to to make peace with the Arab world.
I know.
Can we go back to the internal American politics for a second? Question from Carrie Hart. There was a clip this morning showing people in Boston burning the American flag in opposition of Trump. What do you think about the polarization among Americans today, and also the claim that there's nuances of anti-Zionism and maybe even anti-Semitism in the Democratic Party?
Well, I have never seen, not in my lifetime, American polarized so much. Some say that it is the worst polarization since the Civil War, you know, more than 150 years ago. That could be the case. But yes, you see, we've had, I would say there could not be two more different presidents than Obama and Trump. And I think this is where, you know, the shock, you cannot have such a turnover, you know, of the pendulum from Obama to a Trump without some shock waves. And the shock waves still continue, even get worse, unfortunately. And the burning of the flag, you know, it could, again, it could help Trump, by the way, because I think the one that wins is the one who will be able to bring his voters in droves to the ballots. So the question is, are the Trump people who are afraid of anarchy, of you know, less security, disbanding police forces and all that, as the progressives say, if they're afraid of it and they will come enthusiastically, he has a chance. On the other hand, all those who are burning the flags, the students, the younger generations, the progressive, if they say, oh, we cannot stand 4 more years of Trump because then the United States will become a dictatorship, and if they come out, Biden will win. But this is the burning of the flags and all the anarchy there and the riots is a manifestation of the polarization, no doubt about it. And the anti-Semitism, unfortunately, you know, that again shows, or if I may just divert for 1 second, that shows again, from a very broader historic perspective, the importance of the state of Israel. Because without the state of Israel, this anti-Semitism would have been much worse. Today, when the Jews have their own place in their own land, where they can defend themselves by themselves, it also reflects on anti-Semitism all over the world. This is why I'm so surprised that here we are so divided as well. But this is a different, a different story, a different discussion. But the anti-Semitism, unfortunately, today is joined together by the far left those who burn the flags, and also by the ultra-right. They both come from different perspectives, but they both are anti-Semites, and I do not see difference between anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism. I think it's one and the same.
Yeah, that's an issue that requires a longer session than the one we have. But since you mentioned us as well, can I ask you about the internal Israeli issue? What is your opinion about the hybrid government we have, its management of the Corona crisis, of the ongoing protest against Netanyahu?
It's a major disappointment. Major disappointment. This is not what we expected from this government. I mean, I don't blame Gantz and Ashkenazi. I think they came in for the right reasons, but they were no match for the political manipulations of Bibi Netanyahu. This is why we are now as we are, and I'm afraid there's no other choice but having an election, because there is no way I see that Bibi will allow Gantz to rotate and replace him. So we will have elections. If we were going having elections, better sooner than later.
Okay, last question. It seems like back to the US and Israel, it seems that the US under Trump, who knows what happens next, but at least now is kind of washing its hands from the Middle East. I mean, cutting the military deployments and letting others,
sure,
mainly Russia, but also Turkey, a country which you yourself has some soft point, right? What is your take on this? I mean, the Middle East is becoming a place where America will have less influence than before.
Yes. First of all, it's an internal decision, American decision, already started with Clinton and Obama, the pivoting towards Asia, the fact that America is now self-sufficient on its energy needs. So for them, really, the Middle East has become more headache than an asset. However, there are still two things that are important for the United States in the Middle East. One is still the waterways. You know, the Middle East, its strategic location, you know, in between East and West, the two hemispheres, the waterways, whether it's the Suez Canal, whether it's the Hormuz. So they will need a presence. And this is why I think they will continue the presence in Qatar when they have the base, in other areas, in other places in the area. So this will continue, but not as you know, deep as it was before. Also, the other thing that they are interested is in counterterrorism. Since still, unfortunately, most of the terrorism is inspired and starting here, they will have to help governments here in counterterrorism. So this will keep the US here, but not in the same way. And certainly that gives, you know, the void is not going to be unoccupied. And certainly the Russians we know are in, Chinese are going to come in right now only economically, but who knows, maybe in the future also in a military way. And of course, the local partners here, you know, it leaves the local partners, or I would say the regional powers, namely Turkey, Israel, Saudi Arabia, Iran, and Egypt are playing around here as gearing to the new era where the superpowers may be less, let's say, evident here. So it's going to be a new play, a new power play. We already are seeing it. We see it in the middle, you know, in the oil and the reserves and the gas, natural gas in the Eastern Mediterranean. We see it in Libya. We see it in Yemen. We see it in Lebanon, of course, in Iraq and Syria. So it's a new era where I think you will see that Israel will have no choice but to be dragged into the regional power play. You know, before we let the Americans take, deal with the power play, or the Soviet Union, or then Russia, but more and more it will have to be us.
One last question about the difference between support of Trump on both sides of the ocean. Here in Israel, it seems like the majority of Israelis love Trump and support him, while in the US, most American Jews support Biden or are anti-Trump. What do you make of this disparity? Do you think it will cause greater friction in the future between American Jews and Israelis?
I hope not, but it certainly is a concern. For sure, it's a cause of concern, because if it is just a mere image, you know, or in the United States, I think about 70% of American Jews will vote for Biden. In Israel,
Yes.
about 70% of Israeli Jews who are Americans will vote for Trump. So again, you know, I cannot blame the Israelis, because you know our mentality here of sometimes of being under siege and all that. So when somebody is nice to us, moving the embassy to Jerusalem, recognizing sovereignty of the Golan Heights, and bringing Arab countries to make peace with us. So I think that explains a great deal why Israelis are here, at least now, in favor of Trump.
Ambassador Ayalon, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us. I'd like to thank my colleagues at the JPC, Talia Dekel, Rachel Lexil, for facilitating it. I'd like to draw your attention to a special event happening this Friday, the first global press conference on climate, organized by our colleagues at the Press Club in Brussels. It will take place between our Israeli part will take place between 12 noon and 3 p.m. on Friday. And JPC will showcase the innovations of some 20 Israeli companies and startups in the area of renewable energy, food and protein substitute, and agriculture. I think, Ambassador, you yourself are involved in, or a director in one of them, Future Meet, I believe.
Right. It's fascinating.
Okay.
You know, Israel is in the cutting edge, you know, when it comes to food security, water development, clean energy. By the way, I say, if I may say that, maybe main reason of the Arab countries, the Gulf countries, to make peace in Israel is to meet the challenges that they will have with drying up. You know, they need food, they need water in the future, they need technology. So this is part of the reason they came to the fore with us.
To the table. Okay, so we will be happy to share with you the link to the press conference. Stay in touch with us if you need more details. And later we'll connect it to the Israeli presentation once it's on YouTube. Thank you for being with us today. Stay safe and goodbye.
Thank you, Uri.
Thank you.